Hey, good afternoon, Scott Luton, Greg White with you here on Supply Chain Now. Greg, how are you today?
I am doing quite well. I just had to announce that we're live because we got people running in and out of the house right now. So,
season for sure, right?
yeah, it's like that. Somebody's going to run in the door and go, "Dad!"
Well, we've got so much to talk about. Of course, today, every Monday at 12 noon is the Supply Chain Buzz here on Supply Chain Now. Usually we track the latest and greatest and some of the more important developments. And every once in a while, we'll bring in a VIP featured guest. And we've got that today as we're
Bigger than Dallas today. Yeah.
Sarbjeet Johal with the Batchery is going to join us about 12:25 or so. And he's bringing, folks, his supply chain hot takes. So get ready and buckle up, right, Greg?
Yeah. I can't wait. Seriously. I think everybody's probably got a little bit of a supply chain hot take after Christmas, Boxing Day, their returns tour, or whatever you want to call it.
Agreed. Hey, quick programming note before we get started here, though. If you enjoyed today's live stream, be sure to find us wherever you get your podcast. Today, we publish a start of a new end of year mini series. We're interviewing each of our podcast hosts and gaining their take on 2020 and looking ahead to 2021. New content, Greg, just for our friend of the show, Chris Razone. So money back guarantee as well, but check that out wherever you get your podcast. As always. Make sure you don't miss Greg White's end of year interview. I'm looking forward to publishing that, I believe, this coming Friday. So that was a great conversation, Greg. All right. So say hello. We're not even going to give folks a sneak peek, Greg. It is that good.
Is it that good? Okay. I haven't actually no recollection of it. You know how that works, right?
I do. Eggnog gets me every once in a while too.
I wish it was that.
All right. Let's say hello to a few folks.
Yeah, no doubt.
Headlines. And then, of course, before we bring in our dear friend Sarbjeet, let's see here. Gary Smith back with us here. Wishing everyone a great Christmas. Happy New Year from Roslyn, New York. Gary, I hope this finds you well. Of course, we can't do a live without Amanda and Clay kind of behind the scenes. David, hopefully this finds you well up in Canada. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year to you. Daria Patel, great to see you here. Looking forward to, I think we're all in store for a great conversation here today. But Daria, keep it coming on social. I've really enjoyed your posts and POV there.
Yeah.
Fod via LinkedIn. Great to have you here with us, Fod. Let's see here. And clicked on the wrong. Here we are. Daniel Hartnett. So Daniel, wishing holiday seasons. Daniel, great to see you here. Looking forward to getting your take on some of the things we talk about here today. Kavan, and of course, Greg, and we'll wrap on this one, is AA in the air capital of the world, right?
Yeah. Yes, and we did a little getting to know you on him, which has, exploded. 3,000 or 4,000 of his closest friends have taken a look at that. We posted something on LinkedIn, just kind of, let's just say, sharing a little bit about AA.
Well, he did a nice job on that. We enjoyed it, and we need to get him on a live stream in 2021 at some point there in Wichita, Kansas. Hello, Lisa. Good morning. Great to have you here. Mike Avra is with us, and Sophia Rivas Herrera is with us here today. Sophia, hope this finds you well. All right, so Greg, you ready to dive into the headlines?
Yeah, let's talk.
We're going to lead with the returns tidal wave is not just coming, it's already here. Tell us more.
So in case you haven't already done it out there, you in TV land, it's coming. You may have even contributed to it significantly yourself. Look, there's going to be a huge surge this year because e-commerce is up over 30% what it was last year, right? And typical returns in e-commerce are 25 to 30%. That's on average. They go as high as 50 and sometimes even greater percentage, particularly in apparel items where people you do something called bracketing. 60% of shoppers do what's called bracketing, which is buying multiple sizes or colors or styles of an item, knowing that they're going to return some of the ones that don't fit, they don't like the color, they don't like the style, that sort of thing. That 60% is actually a 50% increase over 3 years and a 29% increase over 2019. Now, why is that? Here's an interesting hashtag COVID happened effect, right? Why more bracketing? Because respondents said their weight has fluctuated during lockdowns. 41% of people have said their weight has fluctuated during the lockdown.
That sounds low.
What's that?
That sounds low. 41%.
Well, fluctuated.
Oh, okay.
Well, and that, those are people who confess it, right? Those are just the people who confess it. Those of us who are on camera, we can't deny it. So, and think about some of the other impacts. They can't try on things in store, so 30+% use that as a reason, and they're buying new brands that they're less familiar with. I didn't even think about that as a potential, but obviously that has a big effect. 92% of customers, here's another thing, 92% of customers said they will be shopping after the holidays. Believe it or not, that's a large number of us, but that's only an incremental, fairly sizable incremental uptick, where 72% of people say they will be shopping after the holidays. So look, returns are part of the holidays. The second biggest shopping year or day in the US is December 26th, and that is because of returns. So, how are retailers dealing with this? They're not equipped for the volume of returns. First of all, they weren't equipped for the volume of e-commerce that occurred.
Right.
So many retailers were not.
In a normal year, they have challenges, right?
Yeah, and that's right. And with demand up that much and such a huge proportion of it becoming e-commerce, obviously that and one of the other effects that I think we can't ignore is that there's so many people new to e-commerce, people that got trapped. Why else did people return? Because the item was not as it appeared on the site. It was smaller than it appeared or whatever, right? So there are all kinds of those things. Retailers are doing a couple of things right now. One, BORIS, as if we needed another acronym, buy online, return in store. So that facilitates the goods going back to commerce virtually immediately, assuming they're not damaged.
Right.
So that's actually a good method of doing things. And then, of course, one of the things that our good friend Tony Sciarrotta will hopefully give us a big cheer for is
who, by the way, was interviewed with NPR last week, Greg.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
Cool.
So one of the things he promotes and probably promoted on NPR was prevention, right? Do those things that prevent returns from happening. So again, make sure the item is as described, and retailers will need to go to extra lengths to do that. Another of the reasons, over half of consumers returned for one of these three reasons: wasn't as described, took too long to arrive, or they planned to bracket their purchases. So, of course, apparel is a huge returns industry. As I said, often more than 50% of it gets returned. It is, by the way, the second largest polluting industry on the globe today. Apparel is. I don't know what's first. I'm guessing it's some sort of industrial production or power production or something like that. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this later, but waste, particularly in packaging, is a big part of the picture as well. So we need to take all these things into consideration. I constantly, consistently, and will always challenge consumers to be thoughtful and mindful in how they purchase to avoid returns. First of all, it's a pain in the tuchus for you. My wife and I did our annual returns tour yesterday, and it was frustrating from a customer experience standpoint. It was a time and a fuel waste from a going around to stores standpoint. In some cases, to find out you can't return it to a particular store. All of those things. So to me, again, I'm with Tony on this. Let's try to figure out how to avoid returns. And frankly, I think we did a pretty good job this year.
Right.
The thing that was frustrating, and Scott, I sent you a photo earlier. The thing that was frustrating was the amount of cardboard boxes. So I think we're going to talk a little bit about that later, and probably with Sarbjeet when he hits.
Yes.
The
and there's some good news there, believe it or not, but still a massive opportunity, as you point out. And to our listeners, this is just one of the articles. Of course, we're big fans here of the dive properties, retail dive, supply chain dive. They do great work. And this article by Daphne Howland is what kind of provided the premise for Greg's conversation here today. But there's no shortage of analysis out there. That's just one of our favorites. Greg, let's say hello to a few folks that joined us just late for that leadoff story, but we've got to recognize them anyway. Your favorite, Tevin, says Cowboys are Super Bowl bound, Greg. Come on, Tevin.
Are they? Good. It will be a joy to stomp their guts out this year.
Oh, Tevin, great to see you here.
If the Chiefs can win playing like they did yesterday,
right. Well,
I was embarrassed to win that game, frankly.
Oh boy, AJ, hello all. Tuned in via LinkedIn. Great to have you here with us. Nairobi, great to have you back. Happy holidays to you as well. Looking forward to your comments and POV today. Tevin says an Aggies robbed in the college football playoff. Hey, we're not partial around here at all, but you may be on something there, Tevin. Clay,
well, I mean, not to get too far off topic, but we had to give Justin Fields a national stage, knowing that he's going to go into the draft next year. And by the way, I think Tevin will be happy to know that your coach at Clemson has been throwing significant shade at Ohio State for only playing 5 games.
Hey, BYOG, come this weekend. You got to bring your own guts. Here we go. Keith Duckworth, great to have you back with us, Keith. Says hello from Michigan. Detroit residents, here's a history note for you. Detroit residents were the first in the nation to have phone numbers. It seems that by 1879, the city had grown so large that operators were no longer able to route the calls by name alone. Keith, I love your history tidbits you bring in really from a Michigan standpoint each and every live stream. So keep that coming.
That's it. That is interesting.
It is. I love it. Ramon says, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year to all the families out there. Great to have you via LinkedIn. Daniel, let's see here. First time in a long time, maybe. Looking forward to connecting with the community. Daniel, hey, if you're here for a community, you're in the right spot. This is a wonderful group here. Greg and I benefit from it each and every week, and great to have you here tuned in via YouTube. Let's see. I want to recognize one more before we hit. Josue is with us, and the comments are moving too quickly for my index finger today here. Josue, hey, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year to you and your team out west in the transportation industry. Hopefully 2021 is a record-setting year for you and your team. Okay.
Sylvia also has joined us, I see.
From the Holy City.
Yeah, temps are back to normal in Charleston. We've had such a hardship here in the South. It's been 32 degrees, so it's awful. With 0 Celsius, which is we are not equipped for, thankfully.
Well, we are not. You're right. No one is. I think we've got 2 salt trucks for the whole state of Georgia. We'll see how all this goes. All right. So let's cover a few more headlines before we bring in our featured guests here today. Certainly no shortage, just some of the things that we're tracking more than others. First up is global container companies having a hard time keeping up, Greg. This is not new. This is not new news, but it's an ongoing story. As reported by JOC, which is another great publication, Alan Murphy, CEO of Sea Intelligence, says, quote, global schedule reliability dropped to 50.1% in November 2020, which means, let's put some context here, which means that for the 4th consecutive month, global schedule reliability has been the lowest across all months since Sea Intelligence introduced the benchmark metric in 2011. But here is something interesting as I read the story. In the States, all of the headlines mainly have been on the West Coast ports and all the issues there. I think as of last Wednesday, there's 23 container ships waiting in the harbor to get in dock and be offloaded. But the East Coast is not immune. East Coast had a greater drop in its schedule reliability for vessels arriving on East Coast ports from Asia from October 2020 to November. I think like an 8-point reliability metric decrease there. So no one is immune, Greg, to these challenges we're seeing, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, so much has been redirected to the East Coast ports because of the jams in the West Coast ports that it's starting to impact all ports. We had seen early, even prior to the pandemic, we saw volumes starting to shift to Charleston and Savannah, in particular Jacksonville, I'm sure as well, even from other East Coast ports. So, yeah, some sort of impact was inevitable. There's a lot of questions around container availability and routing and that sort of thing.
That's right. Where are they all? Goodness gracious. What a story. And we'll keep tracking it into 2021. No end in sight. Secondly, here's some good news. Supply chain leadership has a new seat at the table at Nordstrom.
Yeah.
So Alexis Dupree, I hope I'm saying that right, is the company's new EVP and Chief Supply Chain Officer. It's going to become the newest member of the company's executive team in January. Guess where she came from, Greg?
I know where she came from because I've worked with her before.
Oh, really? Wow. Okay. Yeah. Man, let me rub your elbows. I'm with some famous people here today on the buzz. She hails from Amazon, where she was VP of Sort Centers and Planning for the Americas. So great get for Nordstrom. I don't want to say kind of behind the curve because supply chain's been gaining more seats at that proverbial C-suite table for years, but this is a neat development, isn't it?
It is. Nordstrom has always been the top performer from a retail perspective and a customer experience perspective, and I think stepping up their game in supply chain is really, really important, right?
Agreed.
And they will do it right. The spirit of the leadership in that company is appropriate. And I don't know Alexis, but I have worked with her and her team in the past, and they are excellent. She shows tremendous leadership gifts, so I'm sure that she'll do a great job there.
Sounds like a great win for Nordstrom consumers for sure. Let's say hello to a few folks. Latia Thomas is with us, the new graduate of Morgan State University. Latia Thomas, supply chain guru, is with us here on the live stream. Great to have you, Latia. And also want to say hello to Syed. Great to have you here tuned in via Facebook there in Pakistan. I hope this finds you and your family well, Syed. All right. So let's see. What else do we have here? So Amazon certainly seen its share of legal and regulatory issues here in the States and in Europe, Greg.
Yep.
We love some of the things they're doing, but Jack Ma is now under similar pressure in China as China's taking action against Alibaba and the Ant Group. Chinese regulators are said to be investigating antitrust violations for Alibaba, and separately, China's central bank and associated regulatory leaders, try to say that 7 times with just 2 cups of coffee, are meeting with the Ant Group to encourage new financial regulations and other rules. Greg, how do you cut through the noise and get to the real story here? What would you say?
In China, it's very simple. It's a cash grab. The way to translate virtually any regulatory change in China is that somehow the government feels like they are not getting enough of the money. So that's really what that means. But the truth is, if you look at China, mostly by the Chinese government, organizations like Amazon have been virtually locked out of China. So what do they expect if Alibaba is going to have some significant and disproportionate impact on the economy and on the marketplace. So I'm not sure how to sort this out. I just know that it's not genuine, as it never is with China, right?
Good point there. So a lot more to come there. Peloton, much easier story here. Peloton wants its customers to listen to their body talk a little louder, Greg. Do you get that? Some folks may not.
I like that.
There's a 1980s tune by, I think, one Olivia Newton-John.
Olivia Newton-John, that's right. Let's get physical.
Well, that trend is back. And to meet a continued surge in demand for its very expensive bikes, we're talking $2,000 plus
Mhm.
for these stationary e-bikes. Peloton has agreed to acquire Precor Inc. for $420 million in cash. One of the primary benefits is Peloton's going to get a boost in manufacturing capacity, which it needs to keep up. Hey, if folks are buying $2,000 bikes, give them all they'll take, right? So
Yeah, and that's just the start of it. I mean, one of the gifts we didn't get our kids was a Peloton, and I didn't even seriously considered it. It's one of those where when they ask for it, you just kind of chuckle.
right.
But they solved their own problem with another brand of bike um, and bought used on a marketplace where the owners or the owners of their bike were waiting for their Pelotons to be delivered, and they were taking months. So I see the issue for Peloton. The demand is incredible. Soon there will be clothes hanging on thousands and thousands of Pelotons around the world.
Man, it's like you took a sneak peek into our bedroom.
Everyone's.
That's right. Hey, well, going back a story here. So Mike Avra says, going back to China and Alibaba and Ant Group, that Jack Ma also said something criticizing government in relations to encouraging investing. And he believes, from what he read, it might have encouraged some of these issues to be brought to the table. So we shall see.
That's
Gary
a
Smith.
great insight.
Agreed. Gary Smith says Peloton was started by a couple of Georgia Tech folks. Had no idea.
Not know that.
So Gary would love to. Yeah, would love to get a couple of names there. That's a pretty fascinating story. Speaking of good news, here's some good news. Waste360.com.
There we go.
Says that the percentage of Americans that recycle cardboard boxes has increased from 55% in 1993 to 92% in 2019. Now, there wasn't a whole bunch of context around the story where I got this, but y'all can go check that out, waste360.com. But that's a bit of a rosier figure, Greg, than I had anticipated. I mean, it's a great, if it's true, it's wonderful. But do you think it's really that high?
No. I think that Americans are attempting to recycle it. As I have a stack 2.5 feet tall outside on the curb right now of broken down cardboard boxes, even as I'm cutting them up and flattening them and that sort of thing, I'm wondering, not cutting them up, just breaking them down, right? Because I'm hopeful that they can be reused, like actually reused. I'm wondering if they're going to actually be recycled when they get to the landfill, right? I think we might be attempting to do it. I don't know if we're actually accomplishing it. I doubt that 92% are getting there. I couldn't help but, as we talked about a little bit before the show, with every cut of tape, I was going, there has to be a better way to do this, right? One, all of those I think are dependent on us as consumers. One is we could consolidate, we could plan better and consolidate deliveries more effectively. We talked about it last week, Scott, with the specific delivery days or things like that. We need some sort of ability to reuse these boxes. I thought all someone needs to do is come get these boxes and tape over this and fill them up again. I just feel like there is a way to reuse them in their existing state without even recycling. So, you know what? That's something I'm going to put my mind to over the next year and research a bit and hopefully help to find a solution for, because it was particularly frustrating this year, right?
I'm with you. You got so much there. I'd love to comment on, but we'll save it for a future conversation. But if there's a ton of, to our audience and community, there's a ton of great documentaries across Netflix and Hulu and Amazon, the Prime, the media channel, that really dive deeper into the recycling industry and some of the challenges, old and new, that they're facing. So much good stuff there. And Robert Dow, you asked a great question we're not going to be able to get to, but does the cardboard actually get recycled, or is it like plastic where we pretend to recycle and it really goes into the landfill? Robert, that's a very highly relevant question. So,
we're all consumers, right? And we're about to introduce our next guest, so maybe we can ask him what he thinks.
Agreed. One quick announcement right before we do that. So here's some more good news right before we bring on Sarbjeet. So we're really pleased to have our Veteran Voices podcast channel, which is really for the veteran community, partner with the nonprofit that's on the move, Vets to Industry. And Vets to Industry is really serves as a great resource, a networking community, and they vet a lot of the veteran service organizations that have really cropped up in the last 15 years to see who's really helping and who's just doing business, and who's really serving the veterans versus who's offering lip service. So we're really pleased for our Veteran Voices podcast to partner with Vets to Industry as we're looking to really ramp up the amplification of the voice of veterans and veteran advocates and veteran families and spouses, you name it. So if you enjoy content like that, find us wherever you get your podcast from, and you can learn a lot more about the nonprofit we partner with, Vets, the numeral 2, industry.com. Greg, you were going to comment?
Vets are particularly well suited for the supply chain industry, and we have a huge need for people. 2 million unfulfilled jobs just in North America, right? Think about what supply chain is about, and think about what the military is about. Making life or death decisions with inadequate information instantaneously, right? So take out life or death, making very important decisions with inadequate information instantaneously. It is a perfect fit.
Agreed. So. Great point. All right. I want to share one more comment here because this gives great perspective before we bring on Sarbjeet. Sylvia says that Precor, that Peloton just acquired, has a manufacturing site in Whitsett, North Carolina, and they tanked and resell as their biggest customer was Anytime Fitness. Now, Greg, when I first moved to Atlanta, I signed up with Anytime Fitness for a monthly plan. And I got to tell you, I almost had to hire F. Lee Bailey and a team of attorneys to get out of that month-to-month plan. I've never forgotten about that.
It's like a timeshare.
Yes.
Right? Once you're in, you can never get out. Yeah.
So, but naturally, fast forward 15 years with folks not going to the gym because of different concerns, that makes a lot more sense. So it sounds like Peloton may have gotten a bit of a deal there. All right. So with no further ado, I'll welcome in our featured guests here today, Greg. We're excited to have Sarbjeet Johal, founding investor and advisor at the Batchery, join us. Good afternoon, Sarbjeet. And I've got to share in the most uttered phrase in 2020 is you are on mute, my friend. There we go.
How 2020 was that?
Yeah, I did that again. Good morning from California here, guys.
Hey.
It is great to have you. We have really so much enjoyed social media, our kind of our digital relationship and your thought leadership, especially on Twitter. Where we first met at an earlier trade digital trade event months ago, and I've really enjoyed it since. So welcome to the Supply Chain Buzz, and really looking forward to your POV here today, Sarbjeet.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for inviting me, and I'm glad to be here and looking forward to say a few words and learn from you guys. And this is the first time I'm listening to your full show, to be honest with you. And I have heard like smaller segments in the past, but interesting and very informative, actually. So a lot of good stuff.
Well, we're probably not as deep in some areas as you are. So I can't wait to hear.
That's why we get together these days.
That's right.
So, Greg, where are we starting today with Sarbjeet?
Yeah, so share with our audience who may not be as familiar with you, Sarbjeet, share a little bit about who you are and where you come from, and the Batchery and some of your other projects as well.
Yeah, Batchery is a side gig for me. Actually, after I left Oracle full-time job, I invested some money into this incubator. We brought it to life from scratch. So it's a Bay Area-based incubator in Berkeley, California, next to UC Berkeley. We have taken about 100 plus startups through the program so far. So you know how the incubators work. They are like startup schools. We bring them in, we sort of graduate them, and they go out and we introduce them to marketing folks and legal folks and VCs and stuff like that, so that they can raise money, and give them know-how how to go to the next level.
Mhm.
So did that, and that's Batchery. And my main line of work is I'm an advisor to C-level folks, or you can say SVPs, VPs, in the technology space. I have worked in technology space in B2B tech for the last 25 years. I've worked at companies like Commerce One, which you guys may not know. It was a B2B darling during .com days. We used to compete fiercely with Lieber. I have a lot of supply chain management experience from that sort of time frame. And then after that, I joined, PeopleSoft, and then EMC to VMware to Rackspace, from Rackspace to Oracle. So kind of completed a circle there.
Yeah.
Yep, been around for a
Very
while.
familiar with PeopleSoft. So
Yep.
So, gosh, to have Sarbjeet and Greg White on the Save live stream, these worlds are uniting. There's going to be, I've got my notes ready to be taken here, Greg and Sarbjeet. So, but it's really neat to have you here for the first time on the Buzz. Sarbjeet, as we were kind of planning, and I really love this little back and forth, as we were planning your appearance here and what we were going to talk about, I was going to ask you, share a tech story or two that you've been tracking, and your response was, what? I want to talk supply chain. I'm passionate about supply chain. And hey, I love that.
Yeah.
The other comment I'll make before we ask you for, some of the things you're tracking here in the supply chain industry is, if anything, we know that, gosh, tech and supply chain, there's ever a very thinner and thinner line, right?
Yeah.
Between those two industries. It's like a Venn diagram is coming into the picture here. But Sarbjeet, what, from a supply chain perspective, what does have your attention right now?
I think it's the disruption in the way we were procuring stuff, and what we were procuring, and what quantities we were procuring, and we all know that with the COVID, it disrupted our supply chains. Like, to start with, from basic necessities like toilet paper to groceries, you name it, right? Some countries, I'm not going to name countries here, I guess. Some countries are a lot dependent on other countries for their supply chain management of day-to-day sort of goods than others. And as we know, we're a lot dependent on China, actually. So there were some disruptions for stuff coming from there because of the workforce disruptions. And also there's a lot of rhetoric lately. Nationalism is on the rise, and there's some contentions between countries, like, okay, they're putting levies, and some people are procuring stuff very quickly before the new limitations go into effect. For example, China procuring a lot of semiconductor from US before we tighten things up, because we always will give warnings, right? And all countries do that. Like, we're going to do this within the next 2 months, and people take posture. So I think that has my attention, to be honest with you. The regulators, nationalism. I traverse in the B2B area most of the time. Like when we talk to supply chain management, less so on B2C kind of stuff, right? And I have written software in this space, sold it, put that into production for a bunch of companies, including Siemens, BT, NTT, and in Europe, and in US, Ford Chrysler Exchange, and stuff like that. So yeah, I could talk about this for
So you can talk
more longer than our show is here.
So Greg, it sounds like that Sarbjeet can really tackle it at a variety of altitudes, from some of the coding and programming all the way up through the C-suite, Greg.
Yeah, I mean, Commerce One was, I don't know, Sarbjeet, I think I may have known some folks there. Did they have ties to Atlanta, Commerce One?
Oh yeah, we were all over the world. Actually, we were one of the best stocks in the when we had the Nasdaq hit 5,000, which was like best era back then, right? So we have surpassed that in last couple of years. But back then, we were the darling of .com days, and our stock went public at $21 a share, and at top we were $999 within like year and a half. Yeah,
So that's pretty good.
that's good.
I need to do
A lot of
that.
money.
No, but that was, and this is an interesting perspective, Sarbjeet, because some people consider procurement, which is a lot of what Commerce One does, right, as a separate thing from supply chain, and I see it as directly involved, whether it's indirect goods or direct goods or finished goods.
Yeah,
all of those contribute to the movement of those goods from their source or their creation, the movement or creation of those goods from their source to the consumer, whether that's B2B or B2C. So have you seen, I mean, I'm just curious, have you seen kind of that dynamic where people divide into procurement versus supply chain? I've heard so many people say either they've been told or they believe that they're not in supply chain because they're in procurement.
yeah. I think I've seen that, by the way, and personally I've seen. My personal view is that supply chain management is the umbrella term, and procurement is a sort of segment of that, if you will. And there's so many different aspects to it, right?
Yeah.
So, and it's nested in a way. Like when you buy toothpaste, and a company making toothpaste is buying maybe the tube material from somewhere else, the cap from somewhere else, and then and the actual stuff which goes into toothpaste, like from 3 different vendors. It can be 4 or 10. We don't know, right? So it's very complex, sort of mix of suppliers and buyers and systems in place and money exchange on the back end, and how much you can store. Like your holding capacity. It plays into it, and how you do financial engineering around supply chain management. And actually, I personally take supply chain management into like even other sort of constructs of business, like the supply chain management of talent, for example, right?
Right.
And supply chain management of our money supply, which is totally a different topic, right? How much money we're printing lately in the US, for example, and other countries are printing, where we are headed, right? The interest rates
We aren't
are
even
low.
bothering to print it. We're just manifesting it out of the ether and saying, thanks for buying those bonds, right?
Yeah. Thanks for buying those bonds. We just infused $8 trillion in the last 6 months. And
So I want to take the conversation into, I want to talk AI. I want to share a couple of comments from the community, and then
Sure.
I'd like to get you both to weigh in on AI, because I know you both had no shortage of comments there and takes. I want to share real quick though. So Pratik, great to have you as always on the live stream here via LinkedIn. Hope this finds you and the family well. Sylvia, going back to our veteran conversation, she's reached out to the Air Force there in Charleston to hire a vet in her office. That is wonderful. So Sylvia, I hope let us know how we can help there. Peter mentioned how Aero Exchange in Dallas was a startup 20 years ago to link airlines to their suppliers. He worked on the early platforms in the first couple of years, it sounds like. Sarbjeet, not sure if that rings a bell.
Yeah, it does.
Michael Averis says, agrees 100% with Greg. Procurement is an integral part of supply chain, and he's seen a lot of companies put procurement in finance.
Well, and I like the way, I really completely agree, Sarbjeet, with the way that you think about it, right? I mean, if you think about supply chain as the overarching, the umbrella, right? Then whether it's transportation or whether it's manufacturing or whether it's procurement or whether it's retail, frankly, all of those are subsets of the greater supply chain. And I think the sooner we start thinking about that, the better off we'll be, right?
Excellent point. So now if I can weigh in here, I want to get y'all. So it goes without saying, the massive explosion of artificial intelligence. It is touching everything, every hour of the day. Sometimes very effectively and with practical bottom line results. And other times it can be a really complete waste of time. So I'd love for y'all, from Sarbjeet, you and Greg both, to offer maybe a guideline or two as everyone's looking, both here in the community and folks that may tune into the replay, folks may be looking at leveraging AI, further investing and ramping up, different platforms that really leverage that. What's a rule of thumb or a guideline that you found here in recent years that business leaders need to keep in mind? And Sarbjeet, let's start with you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think with AI, I usually say that don't use term AI as artificial intelligence. Use that as augmented intelligence, right? So we are not there yet where we can say like we can replace human intelligence with machines. We're not there yet. We won't be there for next, I don't know, 15, 20 years. I mean, that's what my gut feel is. But having said that, there are a lot of actually problems across different verticals, which are a finite set of problems in our systems, like fraud detection in financials, right?
Mhm.
Demand prediction in supply chain management, for example, right? Supplier rating systems can be done auto magically, if you will, to a certain extent. If that's a huge sort of topic, a pain point in the whole supply chain management is not having supplier rating systems in place. We tried putting those place when I was working at Commerce One with Siemens. We started building one from scratch for Siemens, particularly. But I think we can use we can start infusing. You can say AI. I will say ML, machine learning to start with, in small doses. And the trick with the ML is that you want the business experts working closely with your data scientists. Data scientists alone will not cut it, and you will fail miserably if you just focus on data scientists only. You need people who understand the business domain. When we build features, what we call features, which variables have what kind of weightage in decision making process, right? That is very important to know, and only business people know that, right? So I usually say that the smartest system is the one which takes into account most number of variables while making a decision. That's what smartest system is. Like the smartest human beings are the ones who know a lot of different contexts. They know a little bit about politics, are the good business leaders. They also know geopolitics sort of situations. They also know a little bit of economics, and they're good with people. So like all of these different contexts in mind, you can make a better calculated decision, right? Same with the machines. Like you need more features coming in, but you need a lot more data thrown at it. So gradually, I would say like do it in gradual chunks. And I always say it's age of micro consumption. To be honest with you, when it comes to technology, just a little bit at a time, a little bit at a time.
Yes. I love that. Kind of take a page out of GE in the good old days when incremental improvement is what they were after, sustainable incremental. All right, so Greg, I'd love for you to weigh in here. We've certainly had no shortage of conversations around AI, but it's so incredible how it's permeating every supply chain article or conversation. I mean, we used to joke around blockchain, but now AI has got to be a part of every conversation, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, I call them the keywords, right? Sarbjeet and I may or may not work with a ton of small companies who are seeking investment, and it becomes a little bit like BS bingo after a while. Everyone has IoT, blockchain, AI, or some combination of those things, right? So, but yeah, I think, and I like the perspective, Sarbjeet, that you enunciated there, and that is think of it as augmentative intelligence, because the truth is, and we've talked about this before here, we need to think of artificial intelligence not as a robot overlord, but more as a child that requires teaching. And really, what we're doing is we're capturing the knowledge, the intellect, the situational expertise of experts in a particular industry, and applying that as guidelines for that ML to learn from, to create an effective artificial intelligence solution, right? So if we think of it from that perspective, I think that is a really, really healthy perspective. The other is, of course, and Sarbjeet, you said it very eloquently here, and gave a good roadmap for it as well. Begin with the end in mind. Start first with the goal, and then work into whether, first of all, whether AI is an application for solving that business problem, and secondly, how, and maybe even in combination with what. For instance, in supply chain, often there are varying types of demand, deterministic demand, causal demand, right? Those sorts of things. You don't need AI for deterministic demand, because that is demand that somebody has said, I'm buying that next week on Tuesday. You don't need AI for that. But if you're trying to determine the cause, what effect does this influencer's tweet have on the sale of, pick a bourbon or whatever, right? Irish whiskey.
Yeah.
Wink,
wink.
And that's a noble cause.
Yeah.
Then there is where AI could be applied and layered with the deterministic methodology for trying to predict demand, for instance. So there are a lot of ways to deploy it, and we mustn't think in absolutes, right? And as you said, Scott, we must think in increments, because whether we try to deploy it in increments or not, ultimately it will only be effective in increments.
Right. Well,
Yeah, just to add a little bit on that.
Yeah, please.
Front, to cover the technology part, which I actually am, that's what I do from day-to-day basis, is that, like, I anticipate that we will have pre-trained model marketplaces coming up soon, and AWS has already announced, they call it features market. Not like there are features in data models, right? Like what variables and have what kind of weightage, and their formulas again, like we can say algos, right? For those fraud detection, for example. And every company needs it almost. Like if you're Visa, MasterCard, you're PayPal, you need it, right? On the back end, and you find a number of variables, you feed it, and then it gives you like, oh, there's a fraud going on, yes or no, kind of thing, right? So in healthcare, there's some use cases like that. In supply chain management, there's some use cases like that. So in different sort of verticals, if you will, and some are horizontal use cases, by the way, some are vertical. You can get pre-trained models. You will be able to get pre-trained models in future. Right now, they're not yet there yet. We actually did a podcast on C3 AI, which is a new IPO, which happened like a couple of weeks back. It's Tom Siebel's company. Yeah, they have a platform and set of what they call applications, what I call pre-trained models. They sell those pre-trained models for you to deploy that in your scenarios. Yeah.
So you both are generating quite a few comments here from the community. I want to introduce a few of those, and then I've got a final question or two for you, Sarbjeet. Keith Moore says, introducing machine learning in small pieces is a great philosophy. Take a repetitive task a person can perform given time and effort, and make it faster with machine learning. Great point there. I'm not sure who this LinkedIn user is. It may be Rhonda. Clay or Amanda, if you could drop that in the chat. AI helped in identifying the COVID rise, and now healthcare supply chain management is having huge demand, right from pharmaceuticals to surgical equipments, now for vaccine distribution. Nirfad, in Greg's AI world, the Chiefs still win the Super Bowl. Nirfad, hopefully this finds you well. Great to have you here via LinkedIn. We've missed you around these parts, you and your sense of humor. Sophia says, multidisciplinary, and this goes back to the procurement versus supply chain conversation, multidisciplinary teams, knowledge integration, and leveraging on individual expertise. Sarbjeet, you're nodding your head a bit. You want to speak to that for a second?
Yeah, I think I'm a big fan of multidisciplinary learning. Like I always say, like when we build software, why can't we build software like Hollywood makes movies? Like producer is there, people come together and they disperse after they finish the project. I think we can learn a lot from healthcare, can learn a lot from auto industry, and vice versa. Like we have actually at some of the constructs we use in software industry, they came from manufacturing, like Six Sigma, that sort of theory, if you will, and then we turn that into agile, and agile is going back into from software to other industries. So I think that's huge. I think what comment was from one of our listeners. I'm sorry, I forgot the name there, but I think they're talking about within the company, right? Marketing, having knowledge of supply chain management, and sales, having that knowledge. I think cross-disciplinary learning within a company from different teams is a huge benefit. And some of the great companies rotate people between different departments. If you listen to some of the best leaders we have in business, their stories, most of them have rotated within a company,
right,
in different sort of segments of the company. They understand how the whole thing works.
Yes, clearly a best practice. In fact, Cisco comes to mind. Cisco, you'll find them on the rankings of any favorite companies globally, and they rotate a lot. They've got even a great internship program between their suppliers that they rolled out a few years ago that works really well. All right, so Greg, we're going to move fast here as we start to close. Zach, our great friend, Zach Ramirez, who did a wonderful job on a recent podcast, Ally Logistics, he's got a great comment and question. I want to pose this question to you, Greg, and then we'll pose it to Sarbjeet. He says, what a great conversation. I wonder what Greg and Sarbjeet see as some, quote, unintended consequences of the push for AI infusion in supply chain. If AI is a child and we need to train, are there bad habits that they are picking up along the way? Greg, are they sneaking a cigarette here or two?
Yeah, undoubtedly they are. I mean, one of the biggest issues with AI is bias. For instance, I mean, regardless of whether we're talking about supply chain, AI has been trained to do things like recognize shoes. If it's trained only using men's shoes to recognize shoes, when you show it a woman's shoe, it does not recognize that as a shoe. So it's very, very precise, and you have to be as conscious and intentional with training an AI mechanism as you do with training a child, right? So yes, it does pick up bad habits, and yes, you do need to consider that. There are all kinds of techniques around that, including synthesized data that people use to train AI models that attempt to remove the bias.
Right.
There are some new models coming out into industry that I think will remove bias. They'll basically present what the data presents to you, or the information presents to you, and then leave that for the AI to interpret itself using things like curiosity. Using curiosity for AI helps it learn more quickly. It tests for itself, and then it learns based on its experience in a pseudo physical world, let's say, rather than constant input from human beings. But particularly because of the generational change that we're undergoing right now, right, with baby boomers leaving the workforce at an incredible rate. The largest generation in the history of the planet is leaving the workforce, and a lot of what they know is right here.
And they're not writing it down.
A great, and it hasn't been written down, and the way that they do their job likely has not been written down in many, many cases, right? So capturing that intellectual capital, right, is critical for companies, and AI is a great tool for doing that. And to just one more point, as Sarbjeet talked about, it can be situationally aware. It can be aware of how the impact of a change by this department impacts that department, and it also never forgets that. That's the critical, some of the critical things that technology can do, and AI in particular can do, is it never introduces emotion, and it never forgets the knowledge that it has gained, right? Which is actually, that's a great increase over human intellect. So there are some incredible benefits to it.
Great point. Sarbjeet, your response, and as we start to wind down, and we'll make sure folks then know how to connect with you. But what does this what comes to mind when you hear this analogy?
How many hours we have?
Yeah, right.
No, actually, seriously, it's a pretty lengthy topic, I believe. I talk about it a lot, and I think about it a lot. By the way, my education has been in economics. I studied econometrics. I'm a PhD dropout of that program, and it's mathematical economics, right? So it's it's very complicated, like area, if you will, when you talk about AI, ML, applying that. So I will simply suggest that you take it in smaller steps, right? You can have a lot more. If you push the pedal, you can get a lot more false positives. You get a lot more bias, and the bias comes from mainly from data, and some comes from the algorithms, but mainly from data, because data is coming from the systems which are operated by people right now. I will suggest that you take a look at RPA, which sits in between what we do right now and where we want to get to. So
Yeah.
RPA will help you automate the processes which are done manually right now. And there's some intelligent RPA engine being built, like where um, uh, uh, some piece of software is monitoring human actions, and then they can train your RPA engines, and you can inject a small dose of ML through RPA into your whatever you're doing. In this case, we're talking about supply chain. I think, by the way, you cannot avoid ML and AI. If you ignore it totally, you will lose. And I have to say that very clearly. Like, you have to do it, but how fast you do it, I think it matters. It You have to. I'll usually say that again. I said that earlier. It's age of micro consumption.
Right.
Take some things in small chunks. You have to make it digestible for your people, your processes, and your existing products and services. I talk a lot about um, sort of skills gravity. The people, what kind of skills people have it, and they keep doing the same thing again and again. And also the like how you are, what's your supply chain management on the talent side? What's your supply chain management of the vendors you're using for supply chain management itself, and for AI, for ML? Will you go to the same vendor which you are getting cloud from right now, or will you pick a different vendor which is like just doing AI, for example? I usually talk about the feature proximity, concepts like that, how quickly you can get on to doing ML and AI when you're doing A, B, and C, for example. How you can add on that
Right.
from the same vendor, or you go to a new vendor. These are complex sort of questions, how to maintain the systems, and how about EOL and end of support of the older systems. Yeah. So
You
these
got to
are lengthy
sometimes.
conversations, but small dose,
Yes.
micro
That's
chunks,
the key.
micro
I love
chunks.
that. Sometimes you got to slow down so you
Yeah.
can go faster in a bigger picture. And I think business leaders have to be really careful with, as fast as the market changes are coming at us, and of course change in general.
Yeah.
If you just dump a platform, throw it over the fence, that not only complicates the challenge of making it happen day in and day out, but you're throwing a lot of technology changes there, and then the relationship challenges. Sarbjeet, you reference, that's a great call out, because if supply chain's anything, you're managing and balancing relationships, old and new, while serving the consumer. So a lot of great stuff there. I want to close, Sarbjeet, your interview with Keith here speaks to something you touched on about halfway through. And he says, even if the boomers who are leaving the workforce write down their institutional knowledge, you'll still miss the intuition and the gut feelings of how to apply all that knowledge to get the job done efficiently and done well. Keith, I agree, but I also like how Sarbjeet put it. You were talking about context and the politics of the situation and kind of that discernment in the scenario themselves. That is probably some of the toughest documentation of how to get stuff done successfully that you can really lose in this in the application of technology. So Sarbjeet and Greg, I wish we did have another hour of time we could block on here, but we'll have to have Sarbjeet back. Daniel mentioned in an earlier comment, Greg and Sarbjeet, this discussion on artificial intelligence and machine learning and supply chain is one of the more balanced and insightful I've heard in quite a while. And Daniel is very astute. If you follow him on social and you see him on live streams, the guy, I believe, Daniel, I might get your bio wrong, but I think he advised the Pentagon and the White House earlier in his career on risk and other things. So he knows a good conversation when he sees one, and as do we here at Supply Chain Now. So really have enjoyed this, Sarbjeet.
Yeah,
Sarbjeet,
thank you.
Yeah, I
good.
really appreciate your time, as busy as you stay, and I love your commitment to getting back to folks on Twitter. But what I admire that, really. What is the easiest way if folks want to connect with you and tap into your expertise and your POV? How can folks connect with you?
Yeah, I'm all over the place. So Google my name, I'm there. So most of the time you can find me on Twitter. The fastest way to get hold of me is text message, and next best is the DM on Twitter, and then after that it's maybe LinkedIn, then it's email.
Love that. So Amanda and Clay, if we can drop in certainly his Twitter profile in the comments, the Twitter link. We've got his LinkedIn in the show notes, and let's make sure we help get folks connected with Sarbjeet. It's a fascinating POV that you've brought here today, from all things technology, procurement, supply chain, talent, and a lot more.
Yeah, I've learned a lot from you guys. Greg, great comments, and Scott, great questions. I always say questions are more important than answers. Believe me,
Yeah.
they are.
Agreed.
doubt.
Agreed. Well, hey, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, all the obligatory. Let's have a
Everything up.
collectively a smashingly successful year in 2021, and we're going to have you back soon. So thanks so much, Sarbjeet Johal.
I wish all your viewers a great 2021, and I hope it's much better than 2020. So
Amen.
Thank you. Thanks
Thanks
guys.
so much, Sarbjeet.
Thanks, Scott.
Take care.
Wow, they're when you get a great guest, Greg, and you're getting great commentary from the community like we always get, it is so tough to make as much traction.
Yeah, it's okay though. I think we hit a number of salient points as evidenced by Sarbjeet's commentary and the comments in the comment stream here. I think can I just talk about gut feeling a little bit? First of all, Sarbjeet and his knowledge, really, really impressive, deep. I felt like it was really complimentary. His understanding is very, very deep, obviously, but he communicates it so effectively, right? Now, and I don't disagree, by the way, on this discussion. I think it was Keith, right, who said gut feeling. But here's what gut feeling actually is. It is indescribable intellect. That's what gut feeling is. Nobody actually has a gut feeling. They just can't describe the means by which they came to a decision, or they influenced a decision, or they impacted a change or something like that. But AI is a great tool if used right. And I think it's kind of a consulting methodology to say, why did you make that decision that way? Gut feel. Well, what made your gut feel that way? If you break it down that way, then you can actually duplicate gut feel, and you never get it wrong. Because one of the major issues, and I've been in supply chain for more than 2 decades, we love to say, particularly in supply chain, is that I've seen a number of studies where 84% of the time that human beings intervene in the process, they're wrong. So we have to mitigate gut feel, and we have to figure out what makes gut feel the right feel, right? And I think with AI applied appropriately and educated appropriately, then we can do that.
Well said. And we're getting some comments there. I agree. I like that indescribable intellect or intelligence there. I love that. All right. So no shortage of conversation. We're going to have a lot more. We all know, it goes without saying, the just how deep and how continue opportunities to go, technology penetrating that traditional supply chain and how it's managed, and the art of the possible in supply chain.
It's exciting.
It really is. Yeah. And it is opening so many opportunities for folks, for the top talent to get involved, for current talent to do more and to do exciting new things. So it's a great story to talk about. Appreciate all the comments coming in. We're going to wrap here momentarily. However, Greg, I do want to touch on, I've gotten a couple of texts, included from our dear friend Gary Smith, Clay broke out the hashtag nerd, the nerd hashtag, which I love.
Saw that.
But you know, not only am I a proud nerd, but I am I'm willing to be a huge geek for my son, who is a huge comic books fan, right? In fact, I never was in my childhood, but he's into it, so I'm into it. I've learned so much from what we call the Marvel Comics consultant that lives here under our household. So today is Stanley Martin Lieber, his birthday, born on this day, December 28, 1922 in New York. Came from very humble beginnings. In his teen years, he shared basically a one-bedroom apartment where his parents slept on a fold-out sofa. And from that humble beginnings, he became a revolutionary, a pioneer, a very successful business person that changed the comic books industry. And if you enjoy the rollout of Batman and Blade and the Avengers and all those movies that have brought entertainment and delight to so many people around the world, Stan Lee, as he's known globally, went on a mission to Hollywood, and for more than a decade, he lobbied Hollywood executives to give comic books, bring them on the silver screen. It's going to be a hit. These stories need to be heard. So we owe him a high five for that, but also we owe him a high five for making superheroes more human, struggling with the challenges of the day, whether it's stuff like the Vietnam War or just growing up. You know, the challenges that Peter Parker had as a high school kid. He did things his way. He refused to do comic books how comic books and stories had always been done. And, you know, for folks that say, well, what's the connection, Scott? Who cares about comic books? There are so many life lessons and business lessons that can be learned in these stories like Stan Lee. So Excelsior, which in Stan Lee's words, he defined it as, it was kind of like his see you later, alligator. Excelsior was upward and onward to greater glory. And so Ben, when he saw this today, my son Ben got a kick out of it, and that gives me a glowing sense of delight. So Greg, your commentary on Stan Lee or comic books or you name it.
Yeah, look, I think people express their understanding of the world in the way that it exits them, right? And Stan Lee understood the world. He understood business. He understood society. He understood human experience in a way that he used caricatures and superheroes to express his understanding of the world. And it's not unlike Ernest Hemingway. An Ernest Hemingway book is the same. A man drinks, a man struggles, a man dies. End of story, right? And that's the way Ernest Hemingway not only understood, but if you know anything about Ernest Hemingway, that's how he lived his life. Right? But you know, I think that all of those types of, dare I say, literature. God, I hope there's not an author on here right now, but dare I say, types of artistic expression with words, right? All of those are reflectant on how the world works or how the world is experienced. So yeah, I think any of those are valid. And you know what I was sitting here thinking as you were talking about? What a fascinating story it would be to understand the supply chain of a comic book.
Yes.
Let's seriously think about that. Talk about a circular economy. When my brother, your son maybe, and other kids are out there finding comic books from the 1920s,
right,
valuing, storing, right, putting them in airtight packaging and all that sort of thing. I mean, talk about a circular economy.
We're gonna do it. And if speaking which, one of my son's favorite gifts I've ever given him was like 100 used comic books that I found online at a kind of an Amazon for comic books and sent to him. You know, I love that circular economy feel to it. So we're going to do a story on the supply chain of comic books. But hey, really quick to the comments. We're getting a lot of comments around Stan Lee being a veteran. He was a veteran. He served in the U.S. Army during World War II initially in the Army Signal Corps, but then he was assigned, once his talent his ability to tell a story was identified, they moved him over to the training film division, where he wrote field manuals and military slogans and whatnot. And I didn't know this as we dove into research, and big thanks to Deb Cooey who helped us out. 3-time Academy Award winning director Frank Capra was one of the folks that Stanley worked with in that training film division, as was, didn't know this, Dr. Seuss was a veteran of the U.S. Army, worked in that training film division. What a talent. And did the Army know they had the incredible talent assembled in they trying to win the war via a propaganda standpoint during World War II. So all very true. Mm-hmm. And it really makes for a great story with lessons that are applicable, as Greg, as you mentioned, across industries. So big thanks for all the comments here today through all the different segments, from the news to Sarbjeet Johal, who brought one, as we thought, brought a wonderful, savvy, been there, done that. Enlightened is the word that comes to mind. Point of view here to today's live stream, Greg.
Undoubtedly. Yeah. I think rational, right, and objective perspective. Somebody said that earlier, right? This was a very objective perspective on AI, and I think that's important, right? We need
Agreed.
There's no value in debating extremes. There is just no value in it. And if we've learned anything from 2020, it's that. If you hadn't learned it before, hopefully you learned it this year. What you need to understand is the merits of something in a rational environment.
Right. Well said.
And I'm a big proponent of rationality. So
well said. All right. It's a lot of good stuff here today. I want to thank Clay and Amanda behind the scenes as always. And Clay, I appreciate that, proud nerd. Hey, you know we're proud nerds around here, whether it's comic books now for me or Star Trek, Star Wars, you name it. You learn so much from those folks and how they weave in, as Keith puts it, they weave in really important commentary that Greg was speaking to earlier into these stories that just happen to be, sci-fi related. Keith says Stan Lee was at the forefront of pushing social boundaries. Powerful women as Miss Marvel, and African-American superheroes, Black Panther and Power Man and others. Keith, great call out there. If you enjoy our conversation here at Tail End about Stan Lee, be sure to check out This Week in Business History, wherever you get your podcasts. And we drop the origin story of Stan Lee on today's episode. All right, so Greg, looking forward to dropping your end-of-year interview, tentatively slated for this Friday. Folks are going to get a kick out of that. What's one key thing when we wrap? We're going to go over a little bit here, but what's one key thing that Sarbjeet said here today that our community should really latch on to? And then I'm going to close.
Wow, finding one key thing is tough, but to me, it was the micro nature of information. Is as he talked about that, I was thinking, how do you teach a kid to speak, or how do you teach a kid the alphabet? You show them an A, right? So if we think of teaching AI by starting with those micro information, whatever he called it. I'm sorry.
The age of micro consumption.
What is it?
The age of micro consumption, he called it.
Micro consumptions, right. So if you think about teaching AI like you teach a child, the analogy that we used, then first you have to show it an A, then you show it a B, then you show it the order in which they come, and then you challenge it at that point to name 3, then 6, then 12, then 26. However long your respective alphabet is, right?
Well,
hey, can I just one thing before we wrap too, Scott? This week on Tequila Sunrise, also, because we are in the giving season, I wanted to make sure that we helped people. So I have been sailing for a lot of years, and I'm copying a philosophy from a great sailing couple, Lynn and Larry Pardee, who said, if you want to go sailing, start small boat, start simple equipment, start now, right? And I want to provide the same kind of scenario. You know how I feel about Give Forward. I want to provide the same type of scenario because I was a bit inspired by something I learned over the holidays about some kind of unintentional giving that I've been doing. So I want to show people how to start simple giving, how to start small, and how to start now. So that's what this episode of Tequila Sunrise is going to be all about. Won't be terribly long. It's going to be very concise, and it's going to allow you to what did you say again, Scott?
Consumptions.
Micro consumption on how to start giving.
And that drops Thursday. Is that right?
Yep.
Awesome. Looking forward to that. Really enjoyed the replay of the Ben Gordon story last week. That's a great one. And folks, really enjoy all the comments here, all the POV shared here today. Sarbjeet was a home run guest. Greg, I appreciate your complimentary perspective on some of the things we talked about. And folks, wherever you are, I hope that your end of year, you get some respite and you get some peace, and you can log off email for a little while and get away from Zoom calls and everything else. But wherever you find that peace and you're able to recharge your batteries in a very meaningful way, and as Greg says, and give forward to others, wherever you find that, hopefully you find that in spades here in the year, because you want to get ready, because 2021 is going to be an incredibly transformative year, and collectively we're gonna make it happen. So really appreciate our community all this year.
Money back guarantee on that.
Money back guarantee. That's right. Hey, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and Happy New Year to all folks that may be listening or tuning into this, wherever you are. Yeah. And on that note, hey, do good, give forward, be the change that's needed, to be like Stanley. And we'll see you next time here on Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.